A season that started with high aspirations for the New York Islanders and ended in extreme disappointment is finally complete. It's over following the Colorado Avalanche's dethroning of the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Stanley Cup champions. Joining me and James today to discuss the Cup final, Islanders prospects ahead of the NHL Draft in the summer of trades and all sorts of shenaniganery is Eyes on Isles expert Mitch Anderson. Thanks to both of you for being here. Mitch, nice to have you back.
Yeah, it's nice to see both of your full-on beards in my 2 days of growth here. Look at you guys. I can't even see your neck, John. It's so long. It's epic.
This is trimmed. I get that a lot.
On,
you were like, when's the last time? I was like, I don't know. I try to keep up on it. It gets a little grizzly when it's too long. You know
what's hilarious? My wife's friend who lives in California is coming to town, and I just realized, because I hadn't seen her in so long, that when she comes here, her husband looks just like you, John. It's crazy. Same beard,
we all look the same.
Everything. It's insane. Like hipster to the T.
Oh, yeah.
Same glasses, same beard shape. Like, it's nuts. So I'm definitely gonna off screen text you this picture of this dude and be like, look at your clone who lives in California.
Yeah, go to Williamsburg or whatever in Brooklyn. You'll see a million of me. We're all the same. I'm pretty convinced. It's not very original.
You also write for the New York Islanders via The Athletic. I think your name's Kevin.
Oh, I could, or I've heard Nick Leddy before.
Yeah.
Did he even? I think Kevin Kersey may have even said that.
I think he did. I don't
remember if it was on.
Listen to our episode.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it was probably in March, but it feels like a billion years ago, maybe a little before that. It feels like forever ago.
Yeah.
Which feels like, this season is finally over. I know it was over for the Islanders a long time ago, but it finally just ended. It could have been ending tonight or tomorrow. Today we're recording this on a Tuesday, so on Wednesday it could have been later this week when it was finally over. It's pushed back maybe a week from a regular NHL season, so it's not that much. They can get back on schedule. July 1st free agency after this summer. So I think where I want to start, and I don't want to take anything away from the Avs victory here. And we will absolutely touch on that. But I want to ask this up front. Are the Lightning, and Mitch, you go first. Are the Lightning a modern dynasty, maybe in the same way that the Blackhawks are? Or did they surpass the Blackhawks? Are they officially more of in that realm? Keeping in mind, the Lightning could win another one in a year or 2, 3 years, and maybe be in the same, come back to the same universe as maybe a Chicago Blackhawks. And would that help cement their legacy as a dynasty if they didn't already?
It's such a subjective answer, right? My answer is going to differ from James, and it's going to differ from yours and whoever else is listening. It's all going to be different. For me, it's 4 cups in a row. If you don't win 4 cups in a row, you're not a dynasty. I don't care whether it's modern or not.
What about 4, like the Edmonton Oilers in the 80s, where it was
not in a row? No,
5 and 7 years. 3 and 7. 3 and 7 years isn't enough.
No, get out of here. 4 in a row or GTFO in my books is really how it works.
Just a straight traditionalist in that regard. You're going for 4 or bust.
That's right. If you don't have 4, I don't care. The Chicago Blackhawks to me are not a modern day dynasty. Or I guess you could say modern day, because you give that asterisk. So it's the cap era. Okay.
Well, I mean, I think it's different. I mean, considering that we've now had 2 sets of back-to-back champions. There's been Pittsburgh, and now there's been the Lightning. There's been teams. You got to remember, there's been less than 10 teams. Actually, I think the Avalanche are the 10th team since the lockout to win the Cup. The 10th different team.
Yep.
Right. So I always have this thought in the back of my head, and James, you'll be able to speak eventually, I guess. I always have this thought in my head, like everyone talks about parity, yet the same teams are kind of winning over and over here, quite literally over and over. But even LA Kings 2 and 3 years, the Blackhawks, Boston may actually be one of the ones that only had a one-off. But there haven't really been. St. Louis is a one-off. The Caps are a one-off. So there's some, but not very many. So I don't know that the parity argument's very good, but considering that 2 in a row is incredible. in today. So is 3 a different threshold, just given the Islanders or the Edmonton Oilers or the teams before that, Montreal? Not only was there no cap, they didn't have to worry about this. How many players did the Islanders have year over year? Was it 14?
It was 14. Oh God, I can't remember the number exactly. You think I know this off the top of my head? I know it's the core of the 4.
Any one of us should know this.
Yeah,
just to be clear. But so it's like, what is it? 15 out of 19, like
Something
a ridiculous,
like that,
ridiculous number year over year. That just doesn't happen. The Lightning lost a third line and made it all the way back.
True.
So, okay. And I had mentioned the fact that I think that the Lightning sure are a dynasty. And I don't know if Mitch saw that. He was looking at his phone. He's like, damn you. But either way, I did. I mentioned that I think that they are in some form their own dynasty, a modern day dynasty. And the reason why I say a modern day dynasty is because I think it's definitely a different era of hockey, right? The Islanders were champions in a time where there were less teams and the skill was largely different than it is now. There was a different kind of hockey game than what's played on the ice today. I don't think that 4 cups in a row is ever going to happen again. I don't know if 3 cups in a row are ever going to happen again. And we were this close to it. And if you're not watching this and you're only listening, my fingertips are very close together. It was this close to happening again. It went to game 6. And Tampa had once again crawled all the way back to the finals again. So the thing for me is it's not just the 2 cups, right? The definition of a dynasty in sports is a team or individual that dominates their sport or league for an extended length of time. For me, I'm looking at 3 years of the Lightning just dominating, and they got dominated in the final. But other than that, they got back to the final. So 30 other teams dominated them, so that for me, 3 seasons worth is an extended period of time. And although they didn't claim that third one, they still have 11 series in a row that they've won in the playoffs.
Well, getting all the way back to the final, I think, is a really big deal.
Right. And no one other than the Islanders has more series wins than them now. So although Mitch, do understand your argument, baby. I do understand your argument. There won't be another dynasty like the Islanders, but a modern day dynasty, I think, is different. 2 cups, I don't think is enough. I'm not going to give it to them because of the two cups. I'm going to give it to them because of the 2 cups and then the little bit of success they had afterwards too. And if you really want to, work with that, I understand saying, well, the Islanders made it back the next year as well. They had more wins after that too. Right. So, which I get, but I think that enhances the argument a little bit and in the favor of the Lightning as well, because again, they made it back. They were this close to doing it again. And it's just, you're not going to see this happen often. Like the Avalanche could do it, but after that, like, could you see anybody else besides the Lightning coming back and dominating like this in the league? Like, I don't see the Rangers doing it forever. I don't see the Flames doing it. I don't see Boston's getting worse, in my opinion.
Yep.
Like all the top dogs in this league, I don't know if anybody's going to be able to sustain this level of success over this period of time long enough. And the last thing I'll say on this too is the asterisks, the COVID cups, all that shit. I don't buy that. I think this was the hardest time anybody could have ever won a Stanley Cup. There was so much more to overcome, in my opinion, to get there. So I do think they're a dynasty in their own right, a modern day dynasty. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the same as the Islanders 4 cups in a row. And to wrap up my spiel, Frank Saravalli, Elliot Friedman, and Pete Blackburn have all also said the same thing, that, the 11 in a row is a big deal in today's NHL.
I don't think anyone would disagree with that. I think it depends on if you're willing to kind of separate the eras, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's fair. I mean, the 90s were different, but they were as back-to-back champions until, the Red Wings did it 97, 98. But then even in that era, it was a lot of teams kind of passing the cup around. The same couple. It felt like it was the Red Wings, Colorado, and New Jersey. For the better part of a decade, 3 teams won it, right? The Avalanche had 2, the Devils had 2, the Red Wings had 2, and then they won in 2002 again, right? So, and so even at that point, you're at the Dallas has one thrown in there, and then and then the Lightning have one. So it's kind of passed around like a little bit, but yeah, I'm not so sure any of the specifics really matter. I think they're the most dominant team in our time. You might not see that again because the Penguins, after their back-to-back, lost in the second round. So they didn't, if they make it to the conference final again, maybe you're having that conversation where the Lightning are really maybe just surpassed that. But they're in the modern kind of league, to do it again in a full season, even if you think there are asterisks on those other seasons, to do it in a full season again, to be like, nope, we can come back and compete and defend our title. I think that's something. It just depends on if you can separate those things.
I think that's an important. Yeah, like immediately I was like, well, why don't we just break it up by decade? It was the dynasty of the decade, right? Of the 20.
And I think that's fair.
Right. Like I think that's where you draw the decade. Does it start in the 2020s? Does it start from the 2020s onwards? Either way, of the 20s, the Lightning could be the dynasty of the decade, and the Pittsburgh the decade before that, and whatever one before that, probably Chicago, and so on and so forth, right? And I think then when everyone's happy, everyone gets a dynasty, and maybe I'm not like, well, the Islanders are still the biggest one. I can still, sit on my soapbox while everyone's like, the crazy guy can be over there where we all agree here, type of thing.
James and I have had this discussion where from where I sat, I was never like, oh, I'm worried about the Islanders' legacy. And maybe it's because I think that it's so important, but it's not like we can't have that define our franchise forever.
Yeah,
it's very important, but eventually, and I'm not saying it's fish sticks time. All the millennials are old enough to dictate and all. No.
Take down the banners, just hang the fish. The fish.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I love that they're involved and they stay involved, and it truly is heartbreaking to see some of them pass away. I'm not taking anything away from it, but that can't be your identity forever. It's important, but no, that cannot be the talking point in perpetuity.
No, you're right. It can't be the only thing that matters, but it is one of the thing that matters right now, because it's the only thing that really kind of defines us outside of a few O's, if you will, like a whole Mike Milbury thing. But even us that want the fish sticks jersey, I got Potvin, Turgeon, Goring, I got Bossy over here, I got Trache over there. I'm all in on the dynasty era as well, but I still, want those the fish sticks. So we recognize that was an important period of time, and I was one of those people that was. I don't like how close Tampa Bay is getting. So maybe that's why I'm a little bit more hesitant to see them kind of lumped into the same category. But all that to be said, I still don't think they're a dynasty, but if we want to split it and carve it into decades, yeah, fine. Let's give them a dynasty status. I'm okay with that.
Even if it was pre-lockout, post-lockout, and we're just defining those things slightly differently. I think that's totally fine. And I think it's also very valid that you have that kind of emotional tie. I feel it too. I think I'd be disappointed. And I think what I had said to James, and it wasn't exactly an original thought, but I liked witnessing greatness in real time. You very rarely get to be there for that. And I was like, all right, I'm cool with them being a dynasty if I get to witness it. If I get to see it live on Twitter and all this stuff and kind of be there for it. I think that's really cool. It's like watching anytime Connor McDavid's playing or Crosby or any of these players. You're like, these are going to be the players that people talk about forever. We all caught the tail end of a Gretzky and Messier, and we got to see Jágr way longer, and it was fairly dominant, into the early 2000s and beyond. But there are a lot of these players that we remember from YouTube clips because we didn't get national games, right? I remember watching. The first Stanley Cup I remember, and this is our transition of the Avs, the first Stanley Cup I remember actually paying attention to was the last time the Avalanche won the cup.
Yep.
Which, if you can imagine, was
which year?
Exactly.
Oh, the last
20 seasons ago. Exactly 20 seasons ago, taking the lockout out.
Right.
20 seasons ago in 2000. Was it 2001, 2002, or was
2001.
So all those years blend together. If you tell me 2001, I'm fine.
Yeah, it's something. It was the Ray Bork year.
Oh god!
But that was when you could only get highlights on ESPN, and the internet had just been a thing. So you can go on NHL.com and watch the highlights.
That was epic.
That was the same year that Kasparaitis won that game in overtime for Pittsburgh against Buffalo, and he did that celebration where he's like swimming on the ice. This is pre-YouTube. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I like how you found a way to throw Kasperitis into this.
Oh my God. Yeah. He was in an article from Down Goes Brown today about, the whole, celebrating the whole, not the whole very good, whatever it was. And I was reading through it, like not expecting any Islander to be in there because
why would there
be? And all of a sudden Kasperitis' name comes up at the end. And I was like, holy shit. That's
yes.
It's so exciting. So then of course I have to like go and I'm watching like YouTube videos of just like early 90s Islanders videos. Right. And then of course I get sucked into the Islanders' first, playoff clinching game in 2002, which I was actually at. And then I like every once in a while, I don't know why I rewatch that Howie Rose calling that victory. And kind of going and like watching Chris Osgood play and just like it's wild. The precursor to the Bates game.
That's epic
in that series. But going on to the Avs, when have we seen a team be this dominant? We can talk about Tampa Bay all we want and dynasty this and dynasty that. Didn't they lost 4 games? The whole playoffs.
4 games in the playoffs, yeah.
When's the last time? This was a very good series, and I'm not taking anything away from Tampa or any of the teams that they played.
Yeah.
When have we seen a team this dominant win the cup? Like straight up just dominate their way through?
Was it the Isles in like, what is it, 82 when I think there's only one series where they didn't sweep type of thing?
Yeah, I don't know that we've seen any kind of dominant performances like that in the playoffs in recent history.
Like they were good series. I think the Blues-Bruins series was really good, going 7 games. And I'm not even talking about that, but just a team kind of going all the way through and just being start to finish just so good. I honestly can't remember.
They're just punking on everyone the whole way through, and you're like, they are a train that has endless momentum and it's just barreling through everyone. The brakes don't work. It's all gas, baby, and everyone's just kind of like diving out of the way, trying to make sure they don't get hit.
Yeah, it may have been maybe the 2013 Blackhawks, like start to finish. They were.
I was thinking that
regular season, they were good. They didn't have any, talk about all gas, no brakes.
Right.
No, that was definitely their MO.
So now I tell my Jets friends all out there.
But like they were, I think start to finish, like that might have been the last time, and that's nearly a decade ago, which is. I'll give you a second to digest that. So that was one of the questions. Just
all the white hair is coming out.
Yeah, yikes! I'm glad that the lighting is a little funky in my room, and I got a hat on. all the gray hair is coming through, mostly probably because of the Islanders.
Fair.
A little bit of the pandemic, I guess. a little bit of the Islanders, last few years and growing up through the Milbury era. But that's. Talking about the Islanders, talking about the future of this team, where's it going to go? We've spent a lot of the time over the last month or so since the Islanders season ended talking about trades, free agency. How is the roster going to improve right now? But a lot of the conversations that need to be had and that we want to have with you, and we're about a week out from the draft, is about the Islanders prospects, who we have in the system and how can we build it? A lot of conversations about that are happening. It's good, it's bad on their fans. A lot of fans and teams get really attached to these players, and we never know where anyone is because we're not all Mitch Andersons where we can watch all these games and pay attention to a million different leagues. So, one of the most exciting prospects that the Islanders have is William Dufour.
Mm-hmm.
Has his, as somebody that was quote unquote an overager, even if it wasn't the exact definition of that word, and he's rolling his eyes, ladies and gentlemen, for those not watching, has he changed the narrative? Like, has he kind of not re-cemented himself, but has he elevated himself to changing that narrative and being somebody in the Islanders system that we can all kind of hang some hope on?
It's
he's hard to franchise changing player. I don't want to put that pressure on him. Like, he doesn't deserve that. But like, has he kind of reinvented himself and put himself maybe back in everyone's good graces to be like, okay, he can really kind of come in here and be a force in the future?
Yeah, the thing with Williams Dufour, and he kind of says it like he's a number of people have said it. Trevor Georgie's told me at the beginning of the season, that's the GM for the St. John Sea Dogs. It's in the piece for Scott Wheeler wrote today on The Athletic, today, June 28th. The circumstances leading up to Williams Dufour's draft really kind of don't help him exceed past that 5th round. He's drafted by the Rouyn-Noranda Huskies, which were an epic team, right? That was Noah Dobson's team. They ended up winning back-to-back Memorial Cups. They trade him away. This was a 6th overall pick at the QMJHL draft. They trade him away so they can bring in players as they make that run. So he's starting off in this league, and they're like, we're trading you away because we're making a run. We have no room for you, kid. And then it happens again in Chicoutimi. Finally, he lands in Drummondville some like 2 years later, and they're like, okay, we're going to give you some run with Xavier Simoneau, and you can play in all situations, 5-on-5, and he starts putting up points. When you look back at his stats, his 2nd year in Drummondville, he's a point per game player, over a point per game player. And then he pops off this year when he's finally put in a team where they're like, we're putting you in a position to succeed. And then he goes off, and then everyone's like, wow, he was a 5th round pick. Okay, yeah, he was, but you look at the circumstances leading up to that, he wasn't really given the chance that a 6th overall pick should have received to become more than a 5th round pick. And now that we see that, should he have been a 5th round pick? No, probably not. He probably should have been something around maybe a 3rd, which then gives you a little bit more hope in and of itself right there. And then you look at a 3rd round pick, you're saying, I still don't say definite NHLer, but I say there's a chance that this guy does something in the pros and it translates to a little bit more given the proper development, which is where we're at now with this kid. We've seen enough to know that he's going to make the pros, and he might be a pretty darn good pro. It's just how high is that ceiling? And that ceiling will raise depending on the development he receives.
So if I could just chime in here real quick, I was actually, to build off what you said, speaking with Scott Wheeler himself today. And I asked him, I said, you wrote a great piece on Dufour, and as I see him, he's obviously upped his game, like you said, through the circumstances. So there's questions about what's this guy's ceiling. Obviously, he was drafted past where he should have been. What are you looking at? A couple of scouts I've reached out to peg him as a 3rd line guy, middle 6 at best. Has he changed the narrative around him to be a crapshoot 5th round guy to a legitimate NHL prospect? And he said, I think that's about right. A top 9 winger who adds size and can score. He's definitely changed the narrative about the likelihood of all of that happening. So he thinks that, he could be in the NHL in more or less a year or 2.
Yeah, I hope so. I gasp a little bit there because 2 years, I think, is specifically because it's Lou Lamoriello we're talking about here.
That was
Lou
my next
Lamoriello
question.
Well, he said the reason why he says more or less a year or 2 is because of the shallow pool that the Islanders have. He has an advantage and more opportunity.
Fair. That there's going to be maybe some more opportunity necessarily to be thrown into the AHL and in his scoring role, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Mainly because of his size, right? He comes into the league 6'3", 205 pounds. Like,
Yeah.
He's not necessarily going to be bossed around physically speaking. That doesn't mean that he's a battering ram necessarily either. He's not necessarily a physical guy like Cal Clutterbuck, for example, but he can withstand some attention, if you will. But with Lou Lamoriello at the helm, the thing with him is we always hear, if you have time, take it. Well, his approach for that specifically to prospects is there's no such thing as bringing a prospect up too late, but there is something about bringing a prospect up too early. So when it comes to these guys, he's not going to rush bringing him in. So I would hesitate to say 1 year unless he absolutely goes off at the AHL level. And I hope to God he does. I don't necessarily see it right away. I think it's going to take a little bit of adjustment. But 2 years minimum for me, 3 years likely. But 2 years is that's where I see it happening. At least in 2 years, not 1. I don't see it happening in 1 year for him.
Yeah, I was of the opinion that it would be 2 years too. And when he said more or less, I think he was probably leaning towards the 2 years anyway when he answered the question. Yeah. So, but I just thought it was interesting that even he, that article came out today, and that was something that I had planned on asking him anyway. So I said, what better time? And I was curious because there, again, there's a lot of talk of, and it's all hearsay because there's a lot of uninformed fans out there who believe that they know. everything, right? So they would say, well, he's playing against, and to your point earlier today, Mitch, he's playing against 16-year-olds.
Yeah,
What was the
but
percentage of 16-year-olds that were actually playing in the
Seconds.
Memorial Cup, Mitch?
3%.
3%?
Yeah, literally 3 guys to be.
Three guys. Okay,
Well,
so
3
three
guys, but
guys.
there's 103 players playing in the Memorial Cup with 3%.
So whatever the percentages worked out to be, it was mostly 18 to 20-year-olds, correct?
19 and 20-year-olds.
Okay. So there you go.
28%, 19, 35 to 36 at 20. I don't have the percentages in front of me, but that's what it was.
Yeah, so there you go. He's playing. It was great to see him have the season he had, and he was doing it against the team that was deemed, or I'm sorry, in a league that was deemed to be a weak crop of prospects. But then he started doing it in the Memorial Cup, which is best on best competition, and the WHL was no joke, and neither was the OHL, and they're in the championship game tomorrow, or tonight as you're hearing this. So they're doing it, and he's doing it.
Yep.
And even if he's 1 or 2 years away, Dufour, from making the Islanders, I think that's even an interesting conversation to have, because thinking about the Islanders might add a forward or two this year, kind of pushing some players down the lineup. You still have a Wahlstrom in the lineup. You might have that Parise spot open up, but that's it. You're talking about 1 or 2 spots, even in 2 years from now, being available on this team. Palmieri's still like up the middle. They're solid for years and years. They have some wingers. Again, even if Beauvillier, Bailey, and Parise are gone in 2 years, we're expecting Beauvillier and Bailey not to be in the lineup next year.
Right.
That's kind of in the plan as it stands. I think the way that most people are envisioning this roster, landing a big fish, getting a supporting player, maybe someone under the radar, and to kind of replace and go above and beyond what Beauvillier was able to provide, there really isn't space in the lineup. You're pushing somebody out, even if, at best it's a second line spot. If they decide, all right, Lee, you're going down the third line, and there's a second line spot, Wahlstrom still does need to prove himself in a big way, I think, as far as consistency is concerned and growth in some way. We have to see him take some kind of step forward. That might be the spot of competition as well. So at best, there's 2 spots. And this is a team that's going to be in contention. You do need players on the cheap to do that for you. Yep. You need some younger players to do that. Can he be that player? And, I think we all see them. We all see Dufour in the AHL next season. I don't think that's much of a question.
I don't think so.
But he's going to be competing against, probably the apple of every Islander fan's eye as far as prospect is concerned, in Aatu Raty.
Yeah.
So that's direct competition with Wahlstrom and Dufour for 2 spots. At best, 2 spots. Unless there's an injury, long-term injury reserve, so on and so forth. If Lamoriello only gets 1 forward.
I would add Holmstrom to that mix in terms of, like, if we're saying, so are we talking about like this year competition for spots on the roster, or next, in 2 years?
In 2 years. This year, there's not like Raty would have to outwork even to just get a regular roster spot, which I don't think they would give him the Dobson treatment in like leaving him on the roster without playing. No. They'll have him play in the American League. He'd have to outwork Bellows and have the projection that he's going to, be ready to go in the lineup ahead of Wahlstrom.
The problem with Raty is that he's a center. He's not a winger. He would not do that well on the wing. He's much, like, 1,000 times better down the middle than he is on the wing. If you play him on the wing, you're not getting the best version of Aatu Raty, and that doesn't go well because the Islanders are pretty locked and loaded down the middle for a while.
So don't typically they start centers on the wing in the NHL just to get their feet wet, to learn the NHL pace and such? I constantly think of that, going back to Jesper Kotkaniemi and his trajectory and how things went for him to start his career. And one of the big slights on Montreal was that they should have started him on the wing so we can learn the pace and learn the game without the responsibility of a center.
Sure. I think the counter to that was, do the Islanders have the time for a guy to just learn the pace? Right? He's got to get in here knowing the pace. It can't be like, you got 9 games to get up to pace and then we'll evaluate. No, you got 9 games to show me you belong from day one. And if you don't show me you belong, because the Islanders aren't in a rebuild. If they're in a rebuild, then absolutely, man, take your time. But they're not in one of those, even in a couple of years from now, as far as I can tell. And so that's going to be a problem for him in terms of pathway towards the NHL. But when it comes to Dufour, he might not have that difficulty because you'll have more openings on the wing than you will down the middle.
So they're not necessarily in competition with one each other.
I would not say so. No.
The issue then becomes the Islanders are pretty solid up the middle. Unless you're trading Peugeot at some point. I don't believe he has any kind of trade protection.
Yeah.
Or he's a modified no trade.
Yeah, I believe it's probably one of those 15-team no trade lists. Standard Lou Lamoriello thing, right? 15. It is a 16-team no trade list.
Yeah. So it's possible that in a year or two, with 2 years left, he can get traded at $5 million as a more than serviceable 31, 32-year-old center. Correct. It wouldn't be that's not out of the realm of possibility. And heck, he might even still be good, and it would be a little disappointing to trade him. But to give some players room to kind of come in here and do that and play their game, especially someone as exciting as Raty to kind of eventually flip spots with Nelson, who would be a good third line center in his mid 30s. So what was your impression of Raty the end of because we can go back to when he was playing overseas, but he had a couple cups of coffee in the AHL here, end of the regular season, into the second round for the Bridgeport Islanders. What was your impression of his transition, and how excited should we really be after he's adjusted to this North American game?
I threw that the entire end of the season in the AHL out. I don't care, honestly. Anyone asked me to say, what did you see? I didn't care. I wasn't looking for anything. The only thing that I think benefited or should benefit Aatu Raty with that stint is his acclimation and living in North America. Some of those soft things that you just don't consider when you think about Simon Holmstrom coming over as an 18-year-old, right? He's thrown into North America and he's like, what the hell am I don't know anything here. I'm sure he's been to North America before playing with juniors and so on and so forth, but not to live sustainably or to live consistently. And so getting that out of the way months ahead of time is huge. What he did on the ice, he could have scored 0 goals and looked out of place, and I didn't care. He could have scored 20 goals and looked like a world beater, and I wouldn't have cared. Because that to me, that time was best served just getting him acquainted with where he is, where the arena is, and so on and so forth, because that gets him a step above next year when it really matters. But considering his year, you should be excited for Aatu Raty. Like, everything he does is outstanding. He's not gonna. The way I put it is that he's not amazing at one particular thing. He's really good at everything. Face-offs, 5-on-5, penalty kill, power play, his shot, puck skills, his physical play, his skating. Again, he's not going to blow you away. He's not Nick Leddy on skates, but his skating will get him to the NHL. And then you tack on, he's about as good at everything else. What are we talking about here? Like, that's amazing. It's not going to be, I don't think, a number one center, Matthew Barzal, going to light the league on fire, but he could be a really good top 6 center at the NHL level, and we got him for free. So you should be damn well excited for that, because the Islanders did not have that in the prospect pool beforehand.
Is he the best center not in the NHL for the Islanders right now? Does he kind of surpass some of these, like Otto Koivula or some other players down in Bridgeport?
Yeah, immediately before even coming to the AHL, 100%, without a doubt. There's no question.
Yeah, I don't really know Koivula that well, and it's kind of disappointing because he was like on the cusp just as the 5th center forever, and Peugeot kind of came over, and that just cemented his legacy as a Bridgeport Islander or as an AHL player, unless he gets traded and gets an opportunity with another team, which isn't out of the realm of possibility unless he really likes playing in Bridgeport and kind of keeps signing contracts. So it's good to know that he's kind of just like come over as a younger player and kind of cemented that. Do you think he has an opportunity if the Islanders did want to move him to the wing? If he blows people away in camp, if you put your Lou Lamoriello hat on, is he just not destined in a bad way, but he's going to Bridgeport? There's just really not a lot of question about it.
Yeah, to me, there's no question. I don't even see them giving him the 9-day stint. I really don't. Yeah, they could, but I don't see why they would just get him over there. Just do it.
Just-
You have
have him
no time to waste.
go to Connecticut, start just get in a routine, get a full season under your belt, stay healthy, have some growth, play in North America. So you mentioned Simon Holmstrom before.
Yeah.
And I think that's a player that, given the Robin Salos and the Ratus and now the Dufour, a lot of Dufour news, kind of got pushed under the blanket a little bit. He's a little hidden from view. What's your take on him? Is he more of a trade ship than anything else at this point? Is he someone that the Islanders should hold on to and continue to develop to one day bring up like some internal competition with some younger players? What's your view on him?
So my view on him is he took a massive step forward this year. Game slowed down at the AHL level is what I keep saying. And he was able to not dominate, but take over specifically for the Bridgeport Islanders. He had a big role for them. It's interesting when you say, is he a trade chip? Yeah, I think his value went up a bit. And he's one of those guys who's on the cusp, right? Like we talked about it before, James, with Simon Holmstrom, like being on the cusp of the roster. Like they're going to give him a shot at camp now to show, like, can you hang? Should we keep this Kiefer Bello guys or should we keep you, Simon? And he's going to have to show them he can. It's going to be hard because Kiefer Bellows, I think, really took a huge step forward as well. It's just which one's taking a bigger step forward this summer. And so that's going to be the thing for Simon Holmstrom. Could they trade him? Probably, but I don't think his value is as high as it should be. But they can get something for him. I just don't think it's going to move the needle too much. More than it would start like a William Dufour, for sure. Regardless of William Dufour putting up 116 points and Simon Holmstrom not putting up 116 points. But Holmstrom still put up 43 at the AHL level, and he's a first rounder. He's also a little bit younger. So like, no, he's not. He's a couple of years older. What I'm talking about. So that kind of benefits him a little bit in terms of his value. I don't think the Islanders are going to look to trade him because I think that's a guy that they look for in a couple of years, like you were saying, guy to step in on a cheap contract and take a winger role from someone, probably a Josh Bailey stepping away type of thing,
like a third line type middle six player, which is fine if you're thinking about the team long term and Lambert coaching this team and what the style is. And while I do think the team needs to be more balanced on the ice, kind of leaning towards the offense a little bit more, you're still going to have that heavy defensive focus. They are going to need specific role players. And if we've seen anything from the last 3 Stanley Cup champions and probably going back before that, a lot of role players. Your bottom 6 is going to help you win some championships there. It's really important. Goalies, defense, and bottom 6. Your Nathan McKinnons are going to score. Your Kucherovs are going to score. Your Stamkoses and your Cale Makars. The superstars have to come out. It's when they don't and they're neutralized by that bottom 6, and then that bottom 6 steps up and scores a goal or two.
That's right.
That's what the Islanders are missing. They were able to, against Tampa Bay Lightning in that Game 7, they lose 1-0. We can have a minute for that, but that's where they largely neutralize the Lightning stars. Yeah, but no one from the Islanders was able to step up in that moment. And we're not talking about a 4-goal outburst to take over. We're talking about 2 goals. Yeah. Like somebody in that bottom 6, Zajac needed to just have a day.
Or a goal and 3 guys to figure out what the hell they needed to do on the power play. That's it. That's all they needed.
I think so. That's the kind of thing. So a guy like Holmstrom with a nose for the net that can really do that on the third line or middle. Let's just call it the bottom 6 because the fourth line for the Islanders can't be around forever.
Right.
They'll need to rethink what that looks like in maybe 2 or 3 years. Say for maybe Casey Zizekas, having a little bit more because he's got a really good offensive prowess. So I think, and it's underrated. Maybe I have that 2013 series stuck in my head against the Penguins. So like, I know that he can do it. I know that Casey Zizekas has still got, still has the wheels and he's very happy playing a specific role, but maybe someone like Holmstrom in the future can start there and move their way up the lineup. Someone else that, had some blips on the radar a couple, when they were drafted, kind of moving forward. Maybe not so much, but Ruslan Iskhakov.
Ishakov, yeah.
Ishakov. Maybe I'm one of those fans that I'm very much out of the prospect game. I don't really pay that much attention to it. Um, who is this player? Are they on the cusp? Are they far away? He's rubbing his hands together like he's gonna eat an entire pizza. What are your thoughts on him?
I love Ruslan. I love him. He's outstanding. I just love his play. The problem with Ruslan, if we will, is something he can't change, and that's his size. He's like 5'9" if he stands on his tippy toes, 170 pounds probably. He's not very big, but holy hell is he creative. He skates well. He's strong on the puck. He digs. He's a guy who will play along the boards. He's not going to push anyone over necessarily, although his center of gravity is really good as accounted of his size. He's pretty damn strong for his size, but he's not going to bulldoze people over, but he will be tenacious. He will fight for that puck. His coach at UConn, he was there for 2 years, said he's not necessarily again, going to bulldoze people over, but he is what I believe a physical player. He is a physical player regardless of his size. And then you add all of those puck skills. His ability to move that puck around and find space and tee up teammates. Oh my God. He is so good. If he gets a chance with skilled line mates, look out. This guy could be something. That's why they drafted him in the second round. He's so ready. When I spoke to him before he left on his summer vacation, he had just signed and he's like, I'm so happy. I can't wait to play. And I was like, yeah, I can't wait to see you for the Bridgeport Islanders. He was like, you mean the NHL Islanders? And I was going, let's go, Ruslan. The confidence is there. I love it.
And he's had quite the journey. A rare one, playing Russian born player, playing a couple years of NCAA, and then dare I say, taking the Austin Matthews route and playing in Europe instead of maybe finishing out that college career and then playing in the AHL and kind of working it out that way. And he had a few good years in La Liga, DEL. What's the projection? Is he somebody really challenging for something? He certainly sounds like he thinks so, which is fantastic. But is he really going to be challenging for a spot with a Simon Holmstrom or Dufour, a Wallstrom, a Bellows? Like, is he really rounding out maybe the 5 or 6 players that could be definitely the future and kind of battling, but in the near future, in that maybe 2-year mark, instead of maybe the 3 or 4 years?
I think so. The only problem is that he's 5'8". So whatever he does, he has to, he can't score at the same rate as someone who's 6 feet. He just can't. He's got to do it more than that. Because if he does score at the same rate as a 6-footer, they're going to go, we'll take the 6-footer and not the 5'8", because we don't think he can do it at the NHL level, which is BS because we've seen a number of short kings do it all the time.
Well, I've seen Paul Kariya comes to mind.
Yeah.
Now he was something else.
Absolutely. College career, 1 year. Oh my God.
Yeah. But he was one of my favorite players growing up.
Yeah.
And because he was just kind of this small statured guy that, he was a captain and he was very stoic and very serious. And I just appreciated that as a person. It seemed like, in any interviews that I was able to catch, on ESPN or on NHL.com, it's, just the whole way he played the game. I really appreciated. And he's a really small guy. So it can, in that era, if it can happen, it can certainly happen now.
So the thing with Russ, go ahead, James. Go ahead.
You see it now. DeBrinket's tiny. Zuccarello's been tiny. Gaudreau is tiny. So I'm not to say that he's of the same level of these particular players, but these guys are small in today's NHL. The thing to me is that you're not that it's when you get to the playoffs, it's a different situation. But regular season, it's much, in my opinion, much less physical than it used to be. It's more speed and skill, and that's something that Ishakov brings. So he might be able to, find his way with his speed and his skill.
Yeah, that's the thing. And he's learned a lot. So he went over to Finland, not completing the UConn because, well, that was COVID, right? That was the first year of COVID. And the way that he told me is that, well, we didn't know what was going to happen the next year. We didn't know how many games we were going to play and so on and so forth. Whereas I knew what we were going to get in Finland. And so he went over, made the switch because he was going to get the game time. Not only that, but he's going to play with men, right? And he did. And the start didn't go too well. Like the start in Finland didn't start great because he was playing on the third line. He got healthy scratched for 2 games. And then Ryan Helminen, who used to play for the Islanders, mind you, sat him down and talked to him about how to be a better two-way center. And by God, he right away, oh, that's what I need to do? You got it, coach. Within weeks, he was playing on the second line, and he ended up being in the top 20 of scoring in the entire league of that season. Then he makes the switch to Germany. And when I spoke to their GM, the German GM was like, look, man, we don't get players like this very often, were the exact words he used with me. And we're just ecstatic to have him. And he was nearly a point per game player while he's there. The only thing that kind of prevented that was near the end, they got a new coach, and the new coach didn't seem to want to play him for reasons I don't understand still. And he missed a lot of the year because of a foot injury. He played, I think it was 26 games on the year. He missed 12 weeks because of that injury that he then re-aggravated, I think 3 or 4 weeks in. So that really chewed out his season, but he's still a point per game player in that league. And he was nearly a point per game player in the Liga, putting up more production than Aatu Raty was, I think, a year or later than Raty did it. So when you think about those things, you're going, this kid's got something. If you give him the chance, he's going to flourish, and they just have to do it.
The action never ends at DraftKings Sportsbook, especially this summer. With tons of ways to bet on all your favorite sports, you can fuel your fandom and feel the heat of the season like never before. Plus, right now, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving new customers a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's right. Make your first bet up to $1,000, and if it doesn't win, you'll get another shot to cash in. You can throw down on all major action for baseball, golf, MMA, and more. Plus, same game parlays, spreads, money lines, over-unders, and props, your betting options feel endless. Best of all, DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now, use promo code THPN, make your first deposit, and get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's promo code THPN, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details.
Before moving on to maybe who else we should keep in mind, one of these players has to hit, right?
Yes.
It can't be. I mean, yeah, I think there's like 2 ways you can have that. One of these players has to hit, right? And like there's just good odds here for one of these really good players to make a difference, and not like and not to really take anything away from what Bellows doing in his role or Dal Cole's doing in his role or something like that. But one of these players, like, they're bound to actually make the NHL and be a good player. Like, I want to ask that as a question, but I don't really know how. Like, that has to happen, right? There's
Yes.
something there.
Just the sheer statistics of it, right? Like the
That's what I'm
odds of them
hoping.
at least one hitting is pretty good. What he hits as is another question. Like what is your hitting defining as? Is it hitting as a explodes at the NHL, or hits as in he makes a good career at the NHL level?
I mean, 15, 20 goals on a regular basis once you're kind of established, or maybe 10 to 20 goals in your first few seasons, moving your way up the lineup and that kind of thing. Eventually and that's what Wahlstrom needs to do, right? He hit 13. Was that so I think that's where, he's got to prove, all right, 16, 18 goals next year, Wahlstrom. Push, sniff 20. Next year, you got to hit over 20. Like, that's the kind of the projection that you're looking for with some of these players. Like, they have to improve, not exponentially, but it has to be noticeable. It can't be like, well, their underlying numbers and this thing, and which are all really important, but like they actually have to move the needle. They actually have to be part of the team moving forward. Who else should we keep in mind? Who's milling around maybe that second tier, or maybe there are other first tier prospects that we should be thinking of for the Islanders?
So we're just thinking about Islanders prospects, right? That's all we're looking at. I don't think there's any more first tier prospects, and even then, I would hesitate putting William Dufour as a first tier prospect. He's just below that in a 1.5 type of role, and that's not taking anything away from him. It's just kind of like we just got to wait to see what he does at the pro level, where some of these guys have already done it, type of thing, like Aatu, Holmstrom, so on and so forth. The next one, these are guys that I watch and I think could make the NHL. Even you got a guy like Aatu Raty, playing in Finland, playing for TPS, going to play for HPK next year. That's a 5th round pick last year. I think he can make the NHL as like a fourth liner. Nothing more than a fourth liner, but a fourth liner. When I look at him, I go, he's got everything. He's got a shot. He's got tenacity. He's physical. He can skate pretty darn well. He's got everything. He just needs to round out into a more complete player. And for TPS last year, he was played at the U20 level, then bumped up to the Liga squad, played on the fourth line, ended up playing on the third line, and helped them really, really, really well near the end of it, pushing as a bottom six forward. With HPK, he's going to be playing in their top six, I would imagine, and having more of a role in the team. That's, I think, where we're going to see him take a step up. And then maybe next year see him at the NHL or the AHL level, that is. But outside of that, Alex Jeffries is probably another name that I'm looking at. And then making the NHL, it's going to be a long shot for a lot of these guys.
What do you think? So Salo is probably outside of this.
Yeah. I have him as a number one tier.
Yeah, as I don't even know that it's maybe he's in the 1A category.
Yeah.
And this group that's really just getting their feet wet with the North American game. Holmstrom's been around for a little bit. I think people,
yes,
that's why I say he was kind of like buried there for a second with a lot of these other prospects kind of coming through, and then the Wallstrom bellows, kind of take some attention away. But a Robin Salo, what do you think about him moving forward as somebody to pair with Scott Mayfield, perhaps on that third pairing? What did you think of his 21 games with the Islanders last year, even all things considered?
I thought they were great. I really did. He made mistakes, of course, but he's 22. What 22-year-old doesn't make mistakes? I got a Good Times tattoo. I made mistakes. It says Good Times on my back. All right. So like with a nautical star, it's a nautical star with a banner that says Good Times. I'm not going to go around and say every 22-year-old made good choices, because I sure as hell did.
Did you lose a bet at a bar called Good Times?
It's actually worse because I designed it. I drew it with the words. I went to a tattoo artist and I said, put this on me, I will pay you. And he gladly took my money, probably laughing the entire time.
Yikes.
So, yeah, and it's there. I'm not ever going to have it removed. That is a reminder for anyone and everyone, including my kids, be like, even adults make dumb decisions.
This was a bad time.
Who doesn't like Good Times? Honestly,
you just got finished watching Brink or something in the late 90s, and you were getting a Good Time set. What is? I don't.
Anyways, that's what I decided. But like Robin Salo made mistakes for sure, but did he learn from those? 100%. I think he should be at the NHL level full time next year, specifically playing, like you said, with Scott Mayfield. It's the better matchup when you have offense first, defense first. Mayfield, a wily vet, plays well defensively, big, strong, tough, and then you got a guy who's got wheels to lug the puck out. That's a good balance. That's a good yin and yang, if you will, on the blue line. And so to me, that works, and it works really well. And they should be given a chance to allow it to work. And I think Lane Lambert will do so.
I will say I did see, the more that he got the confidence and was getting the reps, you almost saw like he was definitely paying attention to a guy like Pelech, who you wouldn't necessarily go, oh, wow, he's got, offensive ability. But what he does have, and I pointed this out on the show, even just texting with James, Joe, and, whoever, watching games, Pelech is really good at escaping with the puck in his own end. Mm-hmm. He gets away from the opposing forecheck really well. And what I saw from Salo as time went on was I think he was picking up on the way that Pelech, it was not only just reading the play, but actually going about getting the puck out of danger. All the Islanders defensemen, like there was Andy Green was also like pretty, given all of his, being 39, 40 years old, he was still pretty good at finding the way out, but like, turning away, maintaining control of the puck and not getting nervous and just throwing it away. Mm-hmm. Something Chara just like lost that ability and just could not handle the puck.
Sebastian Aho every other shift.
It was something where, just you could tell when players think it's a hand grenade, as my coach used to say. Mm-hmm. Hold on to the puck. It's not going to explode on your stick. hold on to it, turn. That's why we, blah, blah, blah. But you could tell that Salo was paying attention, because as time went on, you saw him just be a little bit of an escape artist. Yeah. He's young. He's got a ton of energy. He's trying to take the most of an opportunity and kind of run with it. But I like that he was already doing that. He was already got those little moments of growth that I thought were really important.
That's the thing with Salo. Whenever I spoke to him, he's very humble and he's not cocky. He's not going to be like, yeah, I'm the best. my crap don't stank type of thing. It's if I'm good enough, I'm gonna get there. Like he always uses that line, if I'm good enough, they'll take me. Because he realizes like all I have to do is learn to be what they want me to be, or learn to go to that level, to be at that level.
Right.
And to do so, it's learning from a guy like Adam Pelech. He does a thing that I don't necessarily do very well. Maybe I should download that information from him. Even when it comes to like just protecting the blue line on the rush. That's something that Adam Pelech does amazingly well that Robin Salo doesn't necessarily do that well.
Yeah, he's
can learn from
mobile.
that.
Yeah, he's mobile for a big guy, and Salo doesn't necessarily have that restriction. So he actually might be better at it in the future than him. And then he gets to see a guy like Dobson as well and what he can do. And Dobson really grew this season. He was like, oh, okay, maybe he'll be a good right side guy and in the future as like a third pair, and he'll just be like an extra little bit of offense. But he turned out to be a really good player throughout the year and just became dominant, dare I say.
Yep.
And I think Salo kind of was able to see that firsthand for a quarter of the season. 20 games is not a joke. 21 games is not a joke.
Right.
So I like that growth. And I had warm thoughts at the beginning of the offseason that it would be Salo and Green splitting time with Mayfield or with Aho, or James and I discussed, talk about a good mentor for Salo if they brought Letty back on a cheap deal to split time. How does all that work? But I think, you kind of given me a little bit of confidence in the kid to say, just go for it. Just stick him in there. You're going to have a seventh defenseman. If they re-sign Aho, which I don't know how likely that is, the dollars and cents wise, or if that's even worth it. If it's somebody else that they, a vet that they bring in on the cheap, if it's Andy Green and he's not playing every game, but Salo getting the majority of the reps, I'm kind of more comfortable than I was before this conversation, for whatever that's worth.
No, you should be okay with him on the third pair playing, maybe not even on the power play. That might be Ryan Pulock's role. Although I think Robin Salo does a good job of walking the line and finding those openings. We saw that with the Bridgeport Islanders this year. His play at the blue line and quarterbacking, if you will, the power play is underrated. Can he do it at the NHL level sustainably? We'll see. But if not, they've got Ryan Pulock who definitely can. So I think they're going to be okay there to just like let him go. And that's what he saw with Noah Dobson. You bring up a point there saying there's a guy who showed his quality and they let him do it. Right. So I just need to show that I can do that and not make mistakes, obviously. And they'll let me run with it. And so I think he sees that and realizes what he's got to do coming forward this year. And I would be surprised if he's not that sixth defenseman on the roster.
Let's shift to the upcoming draft.
Okay.
A lot of questions about the 13th overall pick.
Yeah.
What do they do with it? So we'll throw it out there bluntly. Is the pick dealt, or are they going to choose at the 13th spot?
I think they traded, right? Like I think James and I have said that a few times. Like they're going to trade it, right?
Yeah.
And so in saying that, who do you think is going to be available in that time frame of the draft to make it valuable, right? It's not just the number and it's high, or it's somewhere in the middle, a little bit better than the middle. It's more than that. Who's going to be available to make that pick actually worth something?
But that's the thing with this draft. And this isn't me like sitting on a fence or something like that. It's all over the place. You just saw Bob McKenzie's ranking today. Slavkovsky's number 1, Shane Wright number 2. No one else has that. Maybe a few other things. Byron has Slavkovsky 1 and Wright 2.
Bronman, as of May 31st, has Slavkovsky 1.
So, but everyone else is Shane Wright. And then you see the volatility. Like when you look at the later picks on McKenzie's draft board, this guy's moved up 22 spots. This guy's moved down 8. There's so much volatility there, which speaks to the strength of that draft, is that I think any team will find the guy they want to find at 13, because it could be anyone. Cutter Gauthier could be available there. He could. You look at Bob McKenzie's board, he jumps up 8. Other people don't have him up that high. Yeah. Anyone could. Frank Nazar, Brad Lambert could be there. Mintyukov. Like there's all kinds of guys that can be available. So whatever team is going to draft or has a guy pegged at that spot could probably get that guy. So we could entice a whole number of teams with that 13th overall pick, because a number of guys who project to be, if you're looking at a forward, a middle six forward, at a defense, probably a top 4 guy. You're looking at maybe even a top pair puck mover type thing. That's what we're looking at here at the 13th overall pick. And if you're an Islanders fan, you might be saying, well, we could use those. True, but the Islanders are operating under our window is open now, and these guys aren't going to service that window for years to come. So that's why we're thinking they're going to move it. But other teams, a whole host of them, could be interested in that 13th overall pick for sure.
If they do choose at that 13th overall pick,
yeah,
who are you thinking? What would kind of fit? What are they looking for?
everything.
Where's the cover? And so, what's your opinion? I was trying to think of this question just before. What's your opinion on just taking the best available player?
Always, that's the only way to do it.
I think who they did a draft against, was it Vancouver, and like one of their like 2 of their drafts, and comparing just who's the best available player at the time they were picking versus who they picked.
Right.
And the generator won every time. Like those players were always better. Thinking about even where Shesterkin was picked or where Makar was picked and the players chosen right before them, even Sorokin maybe, although, goalies are a little bit more of a crapshoot. So maybe Makar is that better example. And we're not talking about trading picks and getting things back and, back and forth. You never know what's going to happen, who's going to be available. But that your opinion is to just pick the best player available. It doesn't really matter who it is. And especially where the Islanders stand. Is that their approach with the way their prospect pool is?
It has to be. I don't understand the approach of we're drafting need. Unless the guy you're drafting is going to jump in the NHL tomorrow, draft need. But when it comes to guys who can jump into the NHL tomorrow from the draft, you're thinking first, second, and maybe third. Those are the only guys that are likely to jump into the NHL the next day. Outside of that, they're not jumping into the NHL the next day. And even then, Shane Wright this year had to go and say, like, yeah, I'm ready for the NHL. He had to convince people he's ready because we don't actually know, because that's where this draft class is at. And that's the thing about the NHL draft. Like when it comes to that, you're not getting a guy who's probably going to be ready today. And even if he is, he's 18 years old. Unless he's Connor McDavid, he's not making an impact. And so unless you're drafting generational player, never draft need. And even then, like, when it's a generational player, why were you drafting need anyways? Just take them. It doesn't matter. So never draft need, because you can fill that need through other means. You draft best, and if that best, when he's ready to hit the NHL, isn't what you need, trade him. Right?
Are there any specific deficiencies that you're seeing? I mean, something that jumps out to me is the goaltending. I'd love to talk a little bit about Skarek as well. Because I don't think there's a lot of talk about trading Varlamov, and there's just the biggest elephant in the room standing on top of a question mark in figuring out what the Islanders would even do, and taking some of the money from Varlamov's $5 million and signing somebody, or is Skarek ready to take that jump? And to me, no, he's if you're not watching ahead to he vehemently shook his head no to that question. Why not? And is he ever going to be an NHL goalie?
Maybe, but he had that really good January, and then something happened in February. We don't know exactly what happened. Probably an injury, because he's out a little bit longer than would have taken to recover from COVID type of thing. But he was out for a while and didn't bounce back. He was not the same goalie he was in January, and so that tells me that he's not necessarily ready. He's not able to bounce back, even after having a good kind of runway to the beginning of the year. So, and before January, he wasn't necessarily lights out to begin with. So January, really good. Everything else, not so good. And so to me, he's not ready for the NHL. Of course, goalies are voodoo, right? Like anything can happen with goalies. He can show up to camp and just be absolutely electric, and Varlamov move him. I doubt that significantly. I would not bank on that. And so when it comes to moving Varley, unless you know of a really, really good backup you can get for really, really cheap, don't do it. It doesn't make sense to me to do it, really. Yeah, unless Edmonton's calling him, we're going to give you everything. Okay, fine. But even then, he's going to say no. So, right, James?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's.
Yeah, Skarek's also only 22.
Yep.
Right, going he's going to maybe be 23 later this year. So there's a lot of time. Goalies are not going to hit at maybe 22, 23, 24 years old. after their age 24 season, maybe. And he's got some time. He's really not been in North America for that long. Maybe, is it 2 or 3 years?
Yeah.
And some of those are COVID years and short and different things with the AHL. So you're not getting the reps. They played 36 games.
24
against the
year.
same 3-4 teams. So two teams. Yeah. I don't know that you can even, even going through this year, he didn't really even get a taste of what a full season might look like.
This was the first full year in a couple of years for him. Well, I guess you got 2 years ago when it was a pretty full year, just kind of cut off in March type of thing. But last year was not 24 games against 2 different teams. What are you really learning from that necessarily?
Yeah, I think that's a tough thing. So do you think that's a priority? Again, not drafting for need, but if that's the best available player, or like you said, it's just deficiencies across the board.
Well, there's deficiencies across the board. When you get to goalie, I believe they will I firmly believe they will draft a goalie. It's just the problem is that you don't have a goalie kind of pigeonholed for the first round. The first goalie is probably going to go in the 3rd round in this draft. And so they will take one. I think it's either Tyler Brennan, and I forget the Finnish goalie's name. T is going to kill me. I forget what the Finnish goalie's name is. It's one of those 2 guys that they're going to take, guaranteed. With Henrik Tikkanen no longer in the prospect pool, you don't really have too many goalies. You got Tristan Lennox, which could make the jump to the AHL this year, and you got Jakob Skarek. That's it. You don't have anyone else the next couple of years kind of filling in the line, if you will. And so that's why I think they're going to be taking goalie, but it's not going to be until the 3rd round.
Is the best case scenario for the Islanders and their prospects that none of them outside of Wahlstrom, and again, your Wahlstrom he just happens to be the guy in the NHL. He's about the same age as a lot of these other players,
right?
And was able to kind of make that jump. So outside of maybe Wahlstrom and Salo and that, would the best case scenario be that none of these players make the team, or even and just marinate in the AHL and kind of give the Islanders a year to have a good prospect pool? Because thinking about the players that we talked about today, Aatu, Holmstrom, Ishakov, Dufour, having that, and even Skarek being able to develop a little more, any of the other players in the AHL, or are bringing anybody over to Bridgeport, having them develop a little bit more, going through a draft, even though you don't have a 1st round pick, would it just buy them a little time?
Yeah, and that's fine. That's fits right into Lou Lamoriello's ideology and philosophy when it comes to these prospects. So would that be the best thing? I know they would all say no. They all want to be in the show, but there's no room, like you said earlier, right?
Yeah, I mean, thinking as logically as we can, and not thinking about, it would be so great if Aatu popped off. But yeah, of course. No, I mean, and if that's the case, I'll be the last one to argue with you. Yeah. But thinking about what Lamoriello, if Aatu makes the lineup, it's because they weren't able to land a fish that they need.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That's what I mean by best case scenario. None of these players are before camp starts. You're like, nope. They're showing up and just proving themselves as Islanders at this point, and they're going to Bridgeport.
Yeah.
Not even a sniff at make me make a hard decision. That decision's been made. Goudreau's there, Fiala's there, Mikheyev is there. The line of Bavillier's gone, Bailey's gone. They've kind of rearranged some things, and you look at the lineup and go, absolutely, those are 12 forwards. Unequivocally, this team is better this year. All prospects, see you in 12 months.
Yeah, I think that's best case scenario for sure. Because then you're right, Len. We've got everyone set. Obviously, they won't like that so much, but you don't really have anyone like Wahlstrom or Dobson even a couple of years ago, kind of knocking on the door, I deserve a spot, and if you don't, there's going to be trouble. There's none of that. Even if Aatu doesn't get a spot, I can't imagine. I'm sure there will be, but I can't imagine anyone to be like, that's a damn shame. Lou Lamoriello needs to be fired for that. No, I will not be one of those people. No one is that close to the NHL roster where they deserve a spot, where that was the case for, I would argue, Dobson and probably Wahlstrom, even a couple of years ago. So they have a spot. There's no room for anyone else now, even without making those signings. And so I hope they make those acquisitions. Oh my God, even a couple of those names you brought up, drooling a little bit thinking about that. But that would be the best case scenario for sure.
So kind of moving in that direction a little bit after, we're going to go through the draft, and then free agency, it follows shortly after.
Mm-hmm.
And we won't have a chance to speak with you here about that. who are the players that have been on your mind as far as the UFA market, even an RFA trade market, and then just straight up guys with a deal, the Chikrins of the world with on defense or somebody else with a few years that the Islanders can snag. Offense, defense, they trade Varlamov. Who's kind of on your radar here?
DeBrincat is the first forward on my radar. I would love that. James is the one who turned me on to DeBrincat. It's just like, you look at that and you're going, how do you not? If you can make this work, how do you not? It doesn't, unless some other team comes in and overbids you or outbids you, and I'm sure that could very well happen, you got to make it work. On defense,
even at that cost, and then knowing you have to re-sign Barzal and DeBrincat next summer.
That's a problem for next summer.
That's next year Lamoriello's problem.
Yeah, like you got to figure it out this year, ASAP, and that's a guy to do it. Doesn't mean that I think Lou Lamoriello will bring him in, but that, for me personally, that's my target. I think it's probably going to end up being Kevin Fiala, really, which is fine, right? Like,
yeah,
that's a fine concession price.
I believe DeBrincat is still an RFA at the end of this. He's arbitration eligible, and he's an RFA, so that does help a little bit. And I'm gonna take a question straight out of James' brain. Even if it's a problem with signing Barzal and DeBrincat next summer, does that prove to Barzal that it's the real deal and they can get a deal done sooner than later?
Yeah, why the hell, right? Like, we got you a 40-goal scorer. We got you a guy who we know can play with elite level players. This is a guy who played with Connor McDavid, right? And everyone was saying the only reason DeBrincat went in the second round is because they're like, well, he's not going to be able to do it without McDavid. And then boom, DeBrincat's like, yo, I'm taking receipts here. File all of your receipts because I'm cashing him in, baby, because he can absolutely do it without playing with Connor McDavid. Sure, you can say, well, he's playing with Patrick Kane. Okay, well, then he can play with elite level talent. That's the takeaway here.
Yeah, doesn't that make, he's also cashing in on those assists? Like, you can get great passes from Sidney Crosby all day. If you're not putting them in, you're nobody.
Exactly.
Which, by the way, who does Matthew Barzal style his game after?
Exactly, right? Patrick Kane.
Oh, okay, cool. Just making sure we're on the same page there.
Yeah, I think that would be something else.
Yeah,
I think that definitely has to be part of the conversation. And I think if you're Lamoriello, thinking about, again, a Fiala, which makes a lot of sense, RFA, or in this case, DeBrincat, RFA.
Yeah,
he either wants somebody with term or someone he can dictate term with.
Yes,
and that it actually elevates both of them. You look at a Forsberg and Gaudreau, I think would also be really, really good. You're paying for them now.
Yeah, and
Fiala and DeBrincat, maybe it depends on if you're going to sign them long term, and and they're both on the younger side. I can't remember exactly how old Fiala is, but if he's an RFA, can't be that old. He's got to be 24.
Yeah, he's 24.
Yeah,
24, 25 years old. I forget when it switches over, because he's certain he's going to hit the NHL game mark, so that won't last forever. That makes a lot more sense for how Lamoriello thinks, even if they're not necessarily. Well, I'll ask this question: DeBrincat versus Gaudreau. What's the better fit next to Barzal? Age aside, next season, game 1, who do you want on that roster out of the two of them?
Oh, I would much rather Gaudreau. I shouldn't say much rather. That makes it seem like DeBrincat's some sort of bum. I would prefer Gaudreau over DeBrincat, but I think DeBrincat is a more likely option than Gaudreau, because you got teams with more money than the Islanders do that are probably going to, like, I think Gaudreau ends up in New Jersey.
So let someone else overspend for somebody like that?
I don't think it's a let them. I think it's just going to happen, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's probably accurate. For me, the reason why I'm gonna, don't get me wrong, Johnny Gaudreau would be amazing. Just thinking about the age and where this team could be in 3 or 4 years, you could see Gaudreau maybe regress a little bit, whereas DeBrincat could still grow, and he's already a multi-40 goal scorer in this league. So, and the fact
the
of the
argument,
matter,
by the way.
The fact of the matter is that the Islanders need goals so bad, and I think Gaudreau had 35. I know he had 116 points, but he had 35 goals last year. He might have even scored 40, But DeBrincat has done it twice already, and he's only 24. He's still growing. He could continue to do it, and it's really all he does. Like, that's his thing. He scores goals,
and that's kind of
Gaudreau does everything. You know,
that's kind of the point. Is a little bit about the window where you're looking for the pure goal scorer. I don't care if he had 40 goals and 60 points, right? You just need somebody to kind of be able to put the puck in the net after Barzal dishes, and where you need more assists and maybe, that bitch. I see you making a face.
It's just because I can see someone like, well, what about Josh Anderson? I'm like, no, dog, bury that right now.
No, we are not even. I was not even going to bring.
I know you weren't, but someone else will, and I want to
name
bury
it.
that.
Yes, I think if the Islanders needed an elevated Matt Martin on a third line, yeah, I think that's fine. He has not proved himself in any way, shape, or form.
I'm with you.
There's no reason for that. I'll eat crow on that. James knows if he'll pop off this year and score 35 goals, watch. But somebody needs to score goals in Montreal. So what does that even mean?
Yeah, well, Mike Hoffman, right? Mike Hoffman will do it.
Well, sure. I don't think he played all that well in Montreal last year.
That's true.
Did he score 20 goals? I think it was 12, if I'm remembering.
Yeah, and he didn't do very well.
No, he didn't do very well. But James, your argument is, I think, the one, right? I think somewhat objectively is, what is a good short and long term, addition to that first line, and then you can kind of look at the other side and say, okay, whatever DeBrincat doesn't have, what do we need in that left winger?
Can we make
whether that's internally or externally?
Yeah.
What do we need to balance this line?
Yeah,
and I thought, if it's somebody externally who's really gonna who needs to prove themselves and who had a really good year last year that can kind of continue that, Mikheyev came up for me. I don't think he's necessarily a first line player in a lot of teams.
No,
but if you have a Barzal and a DeBrincat with a Mikheyev who can score 21 goals and kind of get involved there and have some energy, maybe. Or maybe you swap something with Lee. Like, I think that's where you can get into those under the radar picks a little bit on the trade market or on the UFA market, that you can just get a DeBrincat and kind of pick somebody else up like that at, fairly cheap, and then mix around your top six a little bit and make it work.
Yeah, I think there's something to that, right? Because I could be wrong here when I name these players, but I look at the Avalanche and you look at the duo of McKinnon and Gabriel Landeskog. They play together, and who flanks them? It's been, or in the most recent history, it was Valeri Nichushkin, and you have those two first line guys, so surefire stars. And then you have Nichushkin, who has been a question mark for the majority of his career. He had a career year this year. Don't get me wrong. He was fantastic. He had an excellent playoffs. Was he elevated by those two guys? It's probable, because it's Nathan McKinnon, right? So your argument is you can have a Mikheyev who's probably a middle six guy, but who will be elevated by these two studs in Barzal and DeBrincat.
Or have Lee jump back up. Like I said, that maybe that top, I like Lee and Nelson together. I think just kind of like getting that and kind of keeping that together. So thinking Barzal and a UFA player, that second line, you probably stick Holmstrom on that right wing and kind of leave it alone. So who is that third player on that first line? If nothing happens and Bailey doesn't get moved, I see that happening as just like the playmaker type thing. I don't love that idea. Again, I bring things up here and not like, oh, I think this is the best thing, but what's likely to happen if they can't move him? Parise is pretty much a surefire thing.
If Beauvillier is still on the roster,
that's a good option too. If you can move Beauvillier, and I've said this to you before, James, if they can not have to move Beauvillier and you really give him a shot with next to Barzal and DeBrincat, and then you can, again, I think the struggle is, what are the assets getting you that defender next to Dobson?
Yeah.
Right. And that becomes the problem. A first overall pick and a Beauvillier, and this could be within a week. I just want to point that out from like time perspective. Like, that move for that first round pick plus whatever for a Chikrin or another defenseman with some term, we are days away.
Yeah.
Single digit, less than a week away from something like that happening, unless it's going to happen after that, in which case the Islanders have picked at the 13th pick. or they
I
trade.
thought you froze there for a second.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't want to. I don't like repeating words, so I was like,
I hear you.
13th
selecting at the 13th
selection.
the 13th selection. Or they traded, and I'm not really for trading the first for like a differing cap, but I understand if that's the case. You're just losing that asset for a defenseman, and then you're thinking about who that might be is not going to be at the level of Chychrun. You are thinking about a different level defender, and maybe that works. Maybe you just need an elevated Mayfield to play a left-handed version of Mayfield or a little bit better between a Pelech and a Mayfield that's a left-hander playing next to Dobson, because Dobson's your guy. You don't need two puck-moving defenders on that pair. You just need the one. You need someone to support him.
I think that's what the Islanders were thinking last year when they're like, oh, we'll be good with Zdeno Chara and Andy Green. And they're like, Noah Dobson will take that step up. Noah Dobson didn't take that step up until much later. And by then it was too late. And
he
it's
couldn't
unfair to be
elevate
like,
one of them.
No, well, that's just it, right? He's also like, he's got an unfairly like someone who's shouldn't be in that position to begin with. And so like taking that step up with that is a whole lot harder. And then he does take the step up and he's still got to drag that around. Although I did like Zdeno Chara he should have been in a lower role. It should have been a third line or third pair role.
They had two third pairs, and that's not a knock on Dobson. He was the best one out of the bottom four. Yeah, but when you have pretty much two third pairs, and you can't really depend on any one of them. The first pair is not together. Yeah, you're screwed.
That's why if you get that not more shutdown guy, but more defensive defenseman on that second pair, which will be a whole lot cheaper, you can make it work. That should be able to work.
I'm going to ask a different question here about the Islanders, the offseason, trade market, all that kind of stuff. Who should they avoid?
Oh,
Josh
Anderson, please.
Oh yeah, Josh Anderson. I think so. I thought of this because I was thinking about. I know I wrote an article 3 under the radar players, but I made sure to avoid players that just had a good playoff run that are kind of like buying themselves the next contract.
God, I hate that.
And Andre Palat, for example, I would. He's so like good. I just struggle with. Did he just have a really good single year and really elevate himself in the playoffs, or is he the real deal? And I don't think the Islanders need a player like that. Somebody will overpay for him.
True.
I'll say this. I think that Palat is in the situation to succeed. That might not be somewhere else.
He's consistently been a 15 to 20 goal scorer, has not broken 20 goals. Actually, he did once, 2013-14.
So the thing for me in terms of Palat wouldn't be like, you need to stay away from that guy. He's going to sink you. It's, if you're going to be paying him big bucks, he's not a big bucks player. That's
what I mean. Stay, because you're going to have to overpay for him. Stay away. Where you need him to be in the lineup, he's not your guy.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Then yes, I would stay away from him because he wouldn't be the guy to fill the role they need to fill. As far as we understand it, right?
I mean,
he's top line winger and a top 4 defenseman. He's not
now. I'll walk that back or play the other side just for argument's sake.
Yep.
Because maybe he's that other guy, that left wing player.
Exactly.
On that top line. It depends on how much it's going to cost. He's coming off a contract. He's coming off a contract that's $5.3 million. He's not going to get paid less.
No.
Even though he's 31. And that, I think, is a reason enough for the Islanders to stay away. I think a lot of people would have a heart attack at another 30-plus player on the Islanders getting a 5-year deal.
Yeah, no. I
think we're over that.
At $6 to $7 million a year.
At 6 to 7, maybe more than that. Somebody's going to pay for it for 5 years. He had 21 points in 23 games. That's incredible. He had 49 in 77 games this last year, 46 and 55, 41 and 69.
Yeah.
That's it. On good Lightning teams.
Yeah.
Yes, elevated his play in the playoffs. He's actually done that the last 3 years and played really well in the playoffs.
Right.
This being
we have Beauvillier already.
We have a Beauvillier who has that potential. That's why I say stay away. This is one of those, you're going to fall in love with 21 points in 23 games, playoff proven, yada, yada, yada.
The hesitation I had was just because it wasn't just one playoff, but when it's a player who does well in one playoff, I always stay away because we're talking about a tournament play, right? Like they played well in a tournament. Cool. Great. That's awesome. but we need someone to get us to that tournament. That's what we're
Yeah.
looking for.
I mean, he has the last 3. I will say, if Lou is like, look, he's a playoff performer.
True, but
I don't know where he fits in the lineup every day, and he may just be that left winger on the first line. But at 31, you're gonna regret that really quick.
yeah, unless for some reason they can get him on the cheap, as in like at that $5 million, it's a stay away. You're right.
Even a 5x5 is a lot for a 31-year-old coming off
True.
all those hard miles, 2 of which were against the Islanders.
Yeah.
In the playoffs, but he had 18, 13, and 21 points in 23 and 25 games over the last 3. It's pretty good in the playoffs.
It is.
I mean, that's really good in the playoffs. It wasn't for some of the other players on that team, really, the Stamkoses and the Kucherovs and whatever.
Right.
You're having a different conversation about who's really leading that team, towards 2 straight Stanley Cups and 3 cup appearances. He's good on that team. You wonder about taking him out of that environment and playing with the players that he's playing with.
True.
And sticking him in an Islanders system. People would lose their mind when he had 35, if he had 35 points with the Islanders in the regular season.
Yeah.
That's going to be DeBrincat too. He's going to score 31 goals with the Islanders, and fans go, why did we trade for this guy? I can't believe we traded a first-round pick and Dufour for DeBrincat. And people are going to just absolutely lose their mind unless they win the cup.
Right. Of course. Other stay away guys, like I can't think of anyone.
Kane.
Sure. Yeah. I thought that was given.
Yeah, as a Lamoriello run team, I find it hard to believe. As I've said with other things, if even just a quarter of the things are true with him, it's still bad.
If that's what we know about, what do we not know about? Is the what kind of bothers me a lot. Obviously, you can't. We speculate like how bad is he actually, but we've seen a lot that makes me just kind of like, yeah, I don't want any. No, thank you. I've seen what he's done. And that's cool. Let some other team do that. I'm perfectly okay with that. Look, we sent Bodie Wild to the ends of Sweden because he wouldn't get a vaccine, but we're going to bring in Evander Kane. Come on, like
that's all right. Just a quick tangent. Unless you have somebody out like on the tip of your tongue before you forget, as far as stay away.
No,
Bodie Wild. What are we doing here with him?
I expect a loan somewhere else next year.
Is he just on? Is this if Robida Island is where Lou sent a player? Is this a different planet? Like this isn't even on. This isn't even an
on
island
the
somewhere.
Moon, man.
This isn't even on the same planet, on an island on the same planet. This seems like it is just a completely different planet.
Yeah, what didn't help Bodie Wild vaccine thing, or like regardless of that, was when he went to Sweden, he didn't do well. He was a healthy scratch more frequently than would be comfortable. He didn't stand out. The minutes weren't necessarily there. The production definitely wasn't there. He wasn't one of the top players for them. So that doesn't help coming back to be like, you've got to play me, vaccine or not. I dominated out there. He didn't do that. I expect a loan somewhere else. I just don't see Lou Lamoriello changing his rule when it comes to the vaccine. I just really don't. He had all the time in the world to bring him in. The vaccine rule wasn't something in Bridgeport per se. You didn't, like in New York State, you didn't need the vaccine, or I think even just New York City. Athletes didn't need the vaccine to compete in Bridgeport. So he could have played, but he didn't. They didn't want him to. So I don't suspect that's going to change in a couple of months. I could understand why it would, but I don't think it will.
I think in a season where, Lamoriello being the veteran that he is, knowing that at some point a bunch of players would be out from COVID one way or another, and the need for call-ups, you needed somebody that was actually going to be ready.
Mm-hmm.
So he wouldn't have been able to play. So you can't take up a roster spot in Bridgeport with somebody that's not going to be able to come up to New York at some point. Right. And going through what they went through, they would have absolutely needed him to play, and he would not have been able to in New York.
So then that's just it. So
a little bit of chess from Lamoriello when we're all thinking kind of more linearly. He was like,
true.
If I can't use him, it's not worth him kind of being in Bridgeport and taking up space. See you later.
No, it makes a whole lot of sense to me. Right. So it just, it is what it is. I don't suspect we're going to see much of Bodie Wild going forward, unless next year he dominates wherever he goes. And I hope so, but I don't think that's going to happen.
While we're on the topic of defensemen, back to your other question, who we're staying away from. I'm also staying away from John Klingberg. He wants 8 years, or he'll want max terms, so it'll be 7 on the free agent market. He was on and off this season. Like he's kind of faded in Miro Heiskanen's limelight, and he's a good defenseman. Don't get me wrong; he'll get you 40 points on the blue line, which is something that the Islanders do need. But you can't commit to him for 7 years, which he's looking for, and he's probably looking to get paid, something in the $7 to $9 million range. That's at least what we've heard on what he wants personally. I honestly don't know who's going to pay him that, but if that's the ask, you're going to stay away from a guy like John Klingberg.
The Islanders are not looking for a second pair right-handed defenseman.
He's a lefty, or he's a left defenseman.
I'm looking at Cat Friendly. It says shoots right defense. Is that incorrect? Should we yell at Cat Friendly?
Always. No, never do it.
I could have sworn he was a left pairing guy. I could be wrong there.
I always get my left and rights mixed up. Not just myself, but like who shoots left and right. Always mixed up.
Oh yeah,
you're right. He's on the right side.
So the Islanders don't necessarily need him unless they somehow they're trading Mayfield, which I know you and I have talked about just as a looking to the future. Mayfield's only got this year left. He's 29. If you're going to re-sign him as your third pair moving forward, just steady somebody pretty well. But who are those? Who are some other options out there? We don't even. Klingberg would be overkill. One way or another. But it also for the reasons you said, he's 29. He's looking for 6 to 8 years for 7 to 8 mil. Absolutely not. That's just not something that would work for the Islanders.
It's too much. It isn't fill the need that they're looking for outside of he wants a top 4 role, or we need a top 4 guy. That's not the guy. It's really not. He's a top pair guy, and we've got that. We got 3 top pair guys.
That's very true. Counting Dobson in that mix, eventually will be a top pair player for defender for the Islanders. Mitch, thanks so much for joining us. Like I said, we're a week away from the draft, and we're probably on the cusp of something. If not at the day of the draft, right before. So good to know where the Islanders stand. Should they draft? Should they not? I think that's complicated. But for a team with their window where it is and how they need to improve right now, or that window might as well just shut the season. It's good to have some of that perspective on. James, you want to kind of close us up here? Wrap us up?
Real quick, Mitch. Just tell everybody we know the news. We know you're not any longer going to be with the Eyes on Isles for too much longer now until the end of the month. But plug us or plug yourself with everybody listening where you can be found regardless.
Yeah, I got 2 more days left with Eyes on Isles. I've been there for 6 years and I've got 2 days left. It feels really sad. But you'll get me on Deckhands. That's my YouTube channel. So just YouTube Deckhands. Don't look for the guy without his shirt off. That's not me. I don't look as good as that guy does. But it's you'll see even just do hashtag Isles on YouTube and you'll certainly find one of my orange thumbnails. And you can get me there. And then on Twitter at TLO Mitch. I don't have social media outside of that. I can't follow Instagram. I don't do TikTok as much as Spiz and Matt O'Leary wants to get me in on it. I'm not a TikToker, so that's where you'll get me, my friends.
We'll have to have you on as our prospect contributor on the show as often as we can, and kind of some Bridgeport updates. I think that would be great. James dabbles in it, maybe a little bit more than that, and stays pretty up to date, but you have a lot of intimate knowledge of a lot of these players and have some good connections. So would hate to see all that kind of, as much as we can get it out there for you and promote Deckhands and all that would be a pleasure. It'd be fantastic.
The pleasure would be mine. And just seeing your faces on a regular basis would be a pleasure indeed.
So we have a Joe Pantorno as our official 3rd member. So we may be the official 4th member of the show here moving forward.
Hey, that makes a 4-piece right there. Let's go.
I believe it's a 4G, but
Right. We got a bass player. In me, we got a drummer in James. Hey, we got a band going.
John's a drummer too, actually.
I don't know. We're
dueling drums.
Yeah, that's always worked. You know,
That's a lot of
I always
percussion.
love the band with 2 drummers. That always
Hey,
that's my favorite.
Slipknot gets it done.
Yeah, so is the Blue Man Group. Like, great. That's I don't know. I'm not really. Although the main drummer for Slipknot's pretty dope.
The Orange
Jordan's-
and Blue Man Group. Huh?
I think that wraps it up here. Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at SM and Hockey. You can find James' work at the fourth period. You can find my work at the Hockey Writers. Sign up for the Isles Fix newsletter on a little bit of a hiatus, but you can check them out on social media, Instagram and Twitter, to kind of follow along with any kind of breaking news that's being posted there. And Mitch, where are you going? Where people can see future work of yours that you'll be doing?
It'll be on Oddshark. I don't get a byline type of thing just yet, so I'm just. The big thing for me is I'm going to be writing for a company that I want to work for. That's what I'm going for. So don't worry about that.
Unbelievable. It's great to see that you're writing and continuing to be out there. So make sure to follow TLO Mitch on Twitter to get whatever he's writing, because he knows what he's writing and he'll pass it along even if his name's not on it yet. He'll make sure to let you know. James, bring us home.
Until next time, everyone. Let's go Island.